Raid Redemption is written and directed by Gareth Evans and stars a bunch of Indonesian actors. I would try to say their names as best as possible. Iko Uwais, Danny Alamsia, Pierre Gruno, and Ray Sahet Happy. I don't know if I got those right, probably not. And in the Raid Redemption, a SWAT team of 20 people goes into this huge apartment complex owned by like a crime lord or something. And every floor is filled with just criminals, and they go in to take out the crime lord. That is your story. Now, I am reviewing the Raid Redemption because the Raid 2, from the time I'm saying this, is coming out, well, tomorrow. That's it's June 4. And another reason why I'm watching this is because a lot of people have been telling me that the Raid Redemption is considered one of the greatest action movies of all time. And I gotta say, it really kind of lives up to that title because the Raid Redemption is mind blowing. Like, the action scenes in this movie are some of the greatest you will ever see. And maybe I'm just saying that because I haven't watched like Hard Boiled or something, but from the perspective of someone who doesn't really watch action movies, wow. Okay, so the cool thing about the Raid Redemption is that it's almost entirely, practical stunts. They filmed this on like a budget of just like $1 million, and really the crew here really just consisted of the director who also served as the writer and the editor, and then you have a bunch of actors, and that's pretty much it. But these actors who, the lead actor Iko Uwais also choreographed the fights, and that's really all you need to make a great movie. It's just absolute skill and talent and, just commitment to your craft. This movie is sort of a combination of lots of gunplay mixed with, martial arts. Definitely gets more martial artsy by the ending of this movie. They use this form, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's called Penkat Silat or something. I read a YouTube comment or something that said that it's pretty much, it teaches you how to hit someone like 1 million times without killing them, and that's really what happens in this movie. Of course, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief for certain things, but once you get past convincing yourself that these people could still be alive after multiple gunshot wounds and punches to the face, this movie is pretty realistic in the way it treats its action. It's very, very intense. It's extremely violent. This movie is unbelievably violent, but it's almost never cartoonish. Like, it really just feels like this could happen in a universe where humans are a bit stronger, but they just take so much abuse in this movie. Now, like I just mentioned, this movie was filmed with like a budget of $1 million, and there are two ways to go about having a low budget. Either you try and do things that you can't do, like you bite off more than you can chew, and your movie ends up looking cheap, or you really go with this budget and make the most out of low budget stuff, and it feels very real. And this movie does feel very real because the costumes are it's typical military costumes. Like, all the villains here don't really look like villains. They're people dressed in normal clothing. But the movie uses this to its advantage by making it seem very, very real. Like, what I loved about how they use this budget is that this apartment complex that they're in, they really maximize like just the venue. Like this dingy apartment complex that's just crumbling down. They really use it so well. Like, they bust through doors and stuff, bust through windows, and they bust through the floor. And to add to the realism, the cinematography here, like the cameras, are pretty much all handheld cameras, and it's not shaky. There's a difference between shaky cam and handheld cameras. Here, it's always clear what's happening, and they really use the handheld stuff to make it feel like you're in the action, like you're in between these two people punching each other. But again, they don't limit themselves to handheld stuff. Like, there are some angles here that are just really, really creative. Like, just when you least expect it, they'll do an overhead shot, and it looks fantastic because it really captures the action like from a different perspective. Now, one of the greatest things about this movie definitely is the editing, and Gareth Evans, who is the director, also edited the movie, and I don't know how he managed to juggle those two gigantic tasks, because the editing in this movie, in my opinion, is almost pretty much flawless. I really can't imagine how much time it took to kind of like storyboard this thing together and to know just which angles to use, like at the perfect moments. Like, every hit is shown. One cool thing I found about the editing and the pacing of this movie is that, the action is broken up by certain parts where characters talk. And a lot of people didn't really like that. They didn't like to be distracted from the action, but I thought they came at just the right times because there were certain points during the action where I really just felt out of breath. Like, oh my god, I can't handle this because it's so intense, it's so violent. But I found that when they put in a conversation, it came at just the right time. It wasn't so long that you started wishing there was more action. Like, it really gives you enough time just to breathe. And you hear that hammer that's going on in the background. So there's construction going on beside my house. But speaking of hammers, the sound design here, like every single hit really feels like it's just like a sledgehammer hitting. Every gunshot feels extremely scary, and that's a great thing for an action movie to pull off, to make all these sounds sound dangerous again. And speaking of sound, the sound design isn't the only thing that's like great about this movie. The score in this movie is fantastic. It's so good. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me just explain that this movie, when it came out originally in Indonesia, it was just called The Raid Without Redemption. However, the version I watched was the English dubbed version from Sony Pictures Classics, and while the dubbing obviously isn't as good as the as having an original voice, they did swap out the score also for a score partially created by Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park. And this score is probably some of the best music in a movie I've ever heard. It's a perfect balance of like thriller meets, kind of like emotional. I don't know how to describe it. It's just so heart pounding, and it matches every single moment, and it's unbelievable. Like if you listen to it now on YouTube, just search like Mike Shinoda, The Raid Redemption. It'll blow your socks off. Now again, like I mentioned, I watched the version with English dubbing, so I can't really evaluate the actors' performances as well as I might want to, because when people speaking a different language, it really is it really shows the acting more truly than like if you have English dub. However, I do have to say the Indonesian actors here are very capable. They're not bad actors at all. It doesn't feel like an American B movie where, there's a bunch of cool action scenes and then the talking scenes and stuff are just cringeworthy. Here, the actors really do bring emotion to their roles. All this really is thanks to Gareth Evans, who I have no idea why he's not like a Hollywood action guru at this point. Because seriously, I mean, when's the last time you saw an American action movie with this kind of action? He understands so well what goes into making a good action movie, making the action clear to people, and not complicating it so much with a story that doesn't work. The great thing about his directing here is that tension is always felt, and not just in the quiet parts that are mind-blowingly tense. Also, like, even during the action, you feel like these heroes can die because you see a lot of these SWAT people taken out very early on, and you realize that they're very vulnerable. They're not superhuman. However, despite all the great things I can say about this movie, there are a couple things that kind of do throw it off track for me. For one, I think there's certain elements that are kind of too silly, that they don't really fit in. It's like when you play Metal Gear Solid and you're going through this intense political plot, and suddenly you have one of the crazy bosses. It's kind of like that in the sense that they're fun and they're really really entertaining. It's just that they don't really fit within what they were establishing. Like there's this one bad guy here named Mad Dog, who is kind of too silly for the rest of the movie. But Mad Dog's incredible. Like his fight scenes are they're some of the best in this movie. That's saying a lot. Also, there is kind of a plot to this movie, and I didn't really mind it throughout the movie. But the way they tried to resolve it by the end, it just doesn't work for me. Like it just kind of feels very confused. Like it's trying to be a bit more profound than it needs to be. But other than that, man, The Raid Redemption is a great movie. This is like one of those ultimate guy movies. You just have to bring over a bunch of guys to your house, watch it together, I don't know, drink a bunch of Red Bull. The worst thing about The Raid Redemption is probably that when you watch an action movie after this, it's probably gonna feel really, really lame. So just make sure you wait a while until you watch another action movie. So that is my review of The Raid Redemption. Have you guys seen it? What did you think about it? Whether you loved it or you hated it, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment and let's have a conversation.